And we have reached where the author, that's Imam Abu Shuja', may Allah have mercy upon him, said, Rahimahullah, Fasl, section, وركعات الصلوات المفروضة 17 ركعة. The total number of cycles of the obligatory prayers is 17 cycles. That means adding all the rak'ahs of the 5 prayers comes to 17 rak'ahs. الشرح هذا إذا كانت الصلاة في الحضر وفي غير يوم الجمعة. And this number, the explanation is that this number 17 is when a person is not praying as a traveler and without counting Jumu'ah, because then it's going to be less. فإن كان فيها جمعة نقصت ركعتان. If it were Friday, then that's going to be 2 less rak'ahs. So that's 15 rak'ahs in your day on Friday. وإن كانت مقصورة نقصت 4 أو 6. And if you're shortening the 4-fold prayers because of being a traveler, so if you were a traveler, then that's going to decrease the number of your rak'ahs for that day, because you're going to take off 2 for Dhuhr, 2 for Asr, and 2 for Isha. That's 6. It's minus 6. So that's going to decrease the number of rak'ahs to 11 in the day. وقوله فيها 17 ركعة إلى آخره يعرف بالتأمل ولا يترتب على ذلك كثير فائدة. And when the author said there are 17 rak'ahs in a day from the 5 obligatory prayers, one can know that by counting it for himself. And the explainers of Abu Shuja', more than one of them said, there is not a great benefit in Abu Shuja' saying so. By the way, the copy of Abu Shuja' that we're reading from also, the text of Abu Shuja' has various nusakh. Nusakh, that means copies. Nusakh, that's the plural of nuskha. A nuskha is a copy. So when we say copies, meaning versions. So the one that is being explained, the copy of Abu Shuja' that's being explained here, is different from some copies. So some copies might have some additions or some subtractions or some rearrangement of chapters. Just in case you're following in your own copy of Abu Shuja'. So if you're following in your own copy of Abu Shuja' and you find that when I say the author said, and then I say what the author said, not the explanation part, just what the author said, because remember, we have a metin, the text, and we have a sharh, an explanation. So whenever you're looking at the original text, you're going to say قال المؤلف or قال المصنف, the author said. And then when you want to elaborate, you're going to say ash-sharh, the explanation. So that's not what the author said. That's what the explainer said. So if you're reading along in your own copy of Abu Shuja', you might find that when I say the author said, there's a slight difference from what you have. So if you want, just take note of that, because there are several copies of Abu Shuja'. Even this one, for example, it has a chapter of Sunnah fasting. In the book of fasting, there's a chapter of Sunnah fasting. That chapter is missing from some copies of Abu Shuja'. Maybe the copy you have doesn't have a chapter of Sunnah fasting in there. Just to give you an idea. So here, I know that in some copies of Abu Shuja', he goes further. He says, Fajr has this many, Dhuhr has this many, Asr has this many, but the copy I'm reading doesn't have that. So I'm just going to read what I have. قال المصنف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, وَمَنْ عَجَزَ عَنِ الْقِيَامِ فِي الْفَرِيضَةِ, and anyone who is unable to stand for the obligatory prayer, صَلَّى جَالِسًا, then he prays sitting. And that doesn't mean in a chair. Yani he could be sitting on the floor, just so that you know. Like some people, they want to sit to pray. Maybe they need to sit to pray. And then if they don't find a chair, I don't know what they're going to do. So you have a floor also. فَإِنْ عَجَزَ عَنِ الْجُلُوسِ صَلَّى مُضْطَجِعًا, and if one is unable to sit, then he prays lying on his side. الشرح, the explanation. إذا عجز المصلي عن القيام في صلاة الفرض, if the praying person is unable to stand for the obligatory prayer, بمشقة تلحقه في قيامه, because of some difficulty that he has while standing, صلى قاعدا, then he can sit while praying. ولا ينقص ثوابه لأنه معذور, and he does not lose any reward because he's excused. ولا يتعين لقعوده هيئة, and there is no particular way he'd be obligated to sit. وكيف قعد جاز, whichever way he sits, it's permissible. But the form of iftirash is best. You know what's iftirash? Iftirash is when you sit, the way you sit, the recommended way to sit for all seatings in the prayer except at the end of the prayer, which is called tawarruk. Inshallah ta'ala, when we get to the end of this book of prayer for this explanation, we'll do a test, inshallah. Before we move to the next book, level 3. We're in level 2 now. So iftirash, talked about that. Iftirash is the best way to sit in all of your sittings in the prayer, except for the end of the prayer. Then the best way to sit for the end of the prayer is called tawarruk. So if you have to pray sitting, any way you sit is acceptable. And sitting means, like we said before, that your buttocks has to land. Any way you sit is acceptable, but the best way is the iftirash. فَإِنْ عَجَزَ عَنِ الْقُعُودِ صَلَّى مُضْطَجِعًا, if one is unable to sit, then he prays laying on his side. ويكون على جنبه الأيمن على المذهب المنصوص, and the best is to pray laying on your right side. So that means your right side is on the ground, your left side is towards the ceiling. If you want to pray on your left side, you can, but that's disliked. ويجب أن يستقبل القبلة, and it's obligatory to face the Qibla. So that means your feet are off to the side. SubhanAllah. Now, for the first time, I imagine a person who's praying laying down on his side, if he's in the Jama'ah prayer and he's laying sideways. So that means somebody's feet are going to be right at his head and the other person's feet are going to be at his feet. I don't know. I haven't heard and I never saw it, but just I'm thinking. Maybe, inshallah, we will learn about it. فَإِن لَّمْ يَسْتَطِعْ صَلَّى عَلَى قَفَاهِ, and if one is unable to pray lying on his side or laying on his side, then he lays on his back. وَرِجْلَاهُ لِلْقِبْلَةِ, and he has the bottom of his feet towards the Qibla. وَيَجِبُ عَلَيْهِ اسْتِقْبَالُهَا بِوَجْهِهِ. And it would be obligatory on this person who's praying while laying on his back to face the Qibla with his face. بِوَضْعِ شَيْءٍ تَحْتَ رَأْسِهِ. By putting something under his head, so that he's not facing the sky or the ceiling, rather so that his head is propped up and his face is facing the Qibla. وَيَكُونُ إِيمَاؤُهُ بِالرُّكُوعِ وَالسُّجُودِ إِلَى الْقِبْلَةِ إِنْ عَجَزَ عَنِ الْإِتْيَانِ بِهِمَا. He said, can I define the iftirash? Yes. Iftirash is the sitting that you do when you sit on your left ankle and the heel of your right foot is vertical and the toes of your right foot are facing towards the Qibla. Is that clear? It's a waterlook is when you sit like that, but instead of sitting on your left foot, you pull your whole left foot underneath your right leg. And you still have the heel of your right foot vertical and your toes facing the Qibla of your right foot. وَيَكُونُ إِيمَاؤُهُ بِالرُّكُوعِ وَالسُّجُودِ إِلَى الْقِبْلَةِ. And this person who's unable to stand, and so he prays sitting or the like, then his bowing and prostrating, or his symbol for that, his replacement for that, would be also towards the Qibla. In ajaza anil ityani bihima. We're talking about a person who's unable to bow and prostrate. So you might be sitting facing the Qibla, and then to bow, you bend over some. To stand back up, you go back to the position you just came out of. To prostrate, you bend over more. And to sit up, you go back to the position you just came out of. Which is what the author says here, the explainer, I mean, وَيَكُونُ سُجُودُهُ أَخْفَضَ مِنْ رُكُوعِهِ. This person who cannot do the normal bowing and prostrating, his prostration, what he does to replace his prostration has to be lower than his bowing. فَإِنْ عَجَزَ عَنْ ذَلِكَ أَوْمَأَ بِطَرْفِهِ. Or if he's unable to do that, then his signal for bowing and prostrating would be by his eyelids. So he's going to lower his eyelids some for bowing and then pick them back up the way they were before he lowered them. And he's going to lower his eyelids more for his sujood and then pick them up for sitting back to the way they were before he lowered them. فإن عجز عن ذلك أجرى أفعال الصلاة على قلبه. And if he's unable to do that even, then he imagines himself praying. We're saying, though, if we're saying he's imagining himself praying, it means he's conscious. He's conscious. He just can't move, though. ثم in qadar, so that's Shafi'i school. His prayer is not dropped, according to the Shafi'i school. ثم إن قدر في هذه الحالة على النطق بالتكبير والقراءة والتشهد والسلام أتى به. Furthermore, if this disabled person were able to pronounce the takbir, Allahu Akbar, and to recite Al-Fatiha and At-Tashahhud, and to say the salam, then he must do so. وَإِلَّا أَجْرَاهُ عَلَى قَلْبِهِ. But if he's unable to do those, although he's conscious, then he imagines himself doing so. وَلَا يَنْقُصُ ثَوَابُهُ, and he will not have less reward. His reward is not diminished. وَلَا إِعَادَةَ عَلَيْهِ, and he will not be obligated to repeat his prayer. وَأَمَّا قَوْلُهُ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, and concerning what the Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam, man salla qa'idan falahu nisfu ajri al-qa'im, whoever prayed sitting has half the reward of who prayed standing. وَمَنْ صَلَّى نَائِمًا فَلَهُ نِصْفُ أَجْرِ الْقَاعِدِ, and whoever prays laying down has half the reward of who prays sitting. فَمَحْمُولٌ عَلَى النَّفْلِ عِنْدَ الْقُدْرَةِ, this hadith about diminished reward, this hadith that confirms a diminished reward, this is about praying a sunnah prayer while able to stand or able to sit. Because standing is only an integral for the obligatory prayer. Just make sure that you didn't miss that accuracy there. Standing is an integral. That's why I look at the Mukhtasar. How did Sheikh say it? Standing for the obligatory prayer when able. He didn't say standing for the prayer when able. He added for the obligatory prayer. Maybe that missed you. So how many times did you look in Mukhtasar and you saw that word for the obligatory prayer and it didn't register for you? It should register for you. You should say, well, does that mean then that it's not obligatory to stand for the sunnah prayer since he deliberately mentioned the obligatory prayer? There should be a point for him to mention the obligatory prayer, because if it's also obligatory for the sunnah prayer, what would be the point of mentioning the obligatory prayer only? That's how you're supposed to look at those things. But if you look at the text of Abu Shuja', he just says to stand, and he doesn't say for the obligatory prayer. So then, does that mean, what does that mean? It means that he summarized a lot there. Abu Shuja', his goal was to come with the briefest summary. وَلَا يَتْرُكُ الصَّلَاةَ مَا دَامَ عَقْلُهُ ثَابِتًا, and one must not abandon the prayer as long as his mind is present. Wallahu a'lam, and Allah knows best. So we're also not just talking about someone who has a cripple or handicap, whether that's permanent or it's temporary. We're also talking about a person who might be tied to a pole or chained to something. Like, imagine if you were tied to a pole, tied to a pillar, or if you were handcuffed to a gate or something like that. So then you might not be able to bow because you can't bend over because your hand is handcuffed. So you're going to do what you can do.